Good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Valerie Robitaille, and I consider myself blessed to have good information about gluten. I believe this issue is the hub of disease for many conditions that arise in your body. Today, I'm going to help you discover how you can determine if you are gluten sensitive, if you are damaging your body, and if you are, what you can do about it. Okay, let's learn. Today I'm going to give you 3 steps, or you could call them paths, to take for anything you want to innovate, create, or accomplish in your life, and specifically for drastically improving gut health. The first step is awareness. You must know a thing exists to be able to change it. So I'm going to talk about gluten and surrounding issues, some of which you may not be aware of that may be appalling, but please bear with me. It will be better to know than not. This is the first step to healing the damage caused by gluten. Know what gluten is and does. The second step is acceptance. If some of the lifestyle behaviors, such as diet, attitude, exercise, or lack of, or environmental factors such as family, social, pollution, work apply to you, acknowledge and accept them. For example, if you already know you have a gluten problem and are constantly surrounded by gluten foods, which I will tell you what they are soon, if you are in pain or have brain fog or whatever your symptoms are and you're eating these foods because you don't have the willpower or strength not to, accept that this is a problem. That's all. Just accept. Some of us already have the first and second steps down. The third step is action. This is where it gets exciting. The path to healing and ultimate health. This is where you change the direction of the downward spiral. Step 1, awareness. Truth number 1, disease begins in the gut. Perhaps you've heard of the importance of a balanced intestinal flora, or having lots of good bacteria in your gut, and that in the absence of balance here, there will be trouble. Well, when the inner walls of the intestines are hit with toxins coming from the food you eat, the body's immune system kicks in, and all kinds of protector substances, such as antibodies and inflammation, race to the site. Normally, when you are not consuming too much toxic food, the immune system can handle it. When there is a toxic overload, though, the 100 trillion bacteria that live inside of us, mostly in the gut, become out of balance because the body must send more and more protector substances. To make matters even worse, in advanced cases, the immune system mistakenly begins to attack healthy tissue. This is an autoimmune response, when the immune system thinks the normal cells of the body are dangerous intruders. In the left slide, you can see tiny protector substances at the site of the injury, right alongside red blood cells. When this is happening in the gut membrane, tiny protrusions called villi, whose job it is to take pieces of food and break them down further so the vitamins, minerals, fats, proteins, and all the essential micronutrients from your food can be absorbed from the intestine into the bloodstream. When these get attacked by the protector immune substances, they begin to flatten or shorten, which we'll see in the next slide. And when 80% of the intestinal villi are flattened, also known as villus atrophy, celiac is the medical diagnosis. Here is a cross-section slide of normal healthy gut villi on the top and villus atrophy, the condition where the villi protrusions become shortened, on the bottom half of the slide. This is the result of continued overconsumption of toxic food and drink. Lesser stages of villus atrophy may be called leaky gut, gluten sensitivity, or gluten intolerance. Truth number 2. Gluten sensitivity, which is much more prevalent than celiac, leads to systems breakdown. Just as if you were to keep on driving on a flat tire, eventually the wheels would fall off, then goes the axle and everything else. While it all happens in the gut, the rest of the body is vulnerable, and I will soon show you how and why this happens. So what are some of the body parts and systems that can be negatively affected by gluten? As you can see in this diagram, just about all of them. So be aware that although it is well established that gluten often impacts the villi of the small intestine, it has been shown to affect the body in a variety of other ways. Gluten sensitivity can be exclusively a neurological disease. That is, with gluten sensitivity, problems can manifest without any gut problems whatsoever. This is because the antibodies that a person has when they are gluten sensitive can be specifically toxic to the brain and nervous system. This is probably the reason so many people with neurological diseases such as autism, ADD, bipolar, epilepsy, neuropathy, etc. do so well on a gluten-free diet. A little earlier in this webinar, we saw how gluten damages the gut lining itself. This can create nutrient malabsorption problems, and this can happen at any juncture of gluten sensitivity, eventually getting worse if gluten is not removed from the diet and healing accomplished. Here's one of the problems for many individuals. Your immune system recognizes one of the components of gluten called gliadin as a toxin. Gliadin is difficult, if not impossible, to digest, making it vulnerable to immune attack. The result is inflammation, but not just in the gut. The inflammation created by gliadin is throughout the body. This has been evidenced by antibody levels seen in people diagnosed with gluten allergy, sensitivity, intolerance, or celiac. As discussed earlier, gluten and its components may have specific affinity for certain glands and other body systems. Here's a pretty good representation of conditions that can be traced back to gluten in the diet. Remember shortened villi in the gut, the last border before the bloodstream. These have a hard time breaking down the food particles that contain all the micronutrients you need to be well. And although I haven't been able to prove it yet for myself, I believe once you have pain in the gut, brain fog, and achy joints, you've probably already suffered some level of villus atrophy that needs healing. But the main point here is that gluten is extremely toxic to people with an allergy, sensitivity, or intolerance to it, and is responsible for more than 200 medical conditions. Step 2 is acceptance. Truth number 3. When gluten makes you sick, you must stop eating it. When your body is inflamed, that means it's so busy putting out the fire that it's difficult or impossible to sustain healthy metabolic activity. If you have some of the conditions on the previous slide, pain in the muscles, joints, or gut, especially the gut, since there are only a few pain receptors here, so by the time you're feeling it, the condition may be quite advanced. If you even suspect gluten is your problem, and now that you're possibly getting more information about the subject, what's the first thing you can do? What is suggested that you accept about your responsibility in healing your body before it becomes worse, more expensive to heal, and more time and energy consuming at some future date? That's correct. You can't eat gluten. Now, mainstream medicals have only recently started recognizing problems caused by villus atrophy and the connection to gluten, But nutritionists and other alternative practitioners have known about these types of issues and have been treating their patients accordingly for much longer. So don't be surprised if your medical doctor is dismissive about the gluten issue or is even condescending. They are probably just getting on board, so forgive them. Enough information has been released that we as intelligent people can see what needs to be done. Truth number 4. Wheat crops are sprayed, although some people say drenched, with Monsanto's pesticide product Roundup, also known as glyphosate, which the World Health Organization calls a probable carcinogen. Today's wheat has also been deamidated, which allows it to be water-soluble and capable of being mixed into virtually every kind of packaged food. This deamidation has been shown to produce a large immune response in many people. Add to this all the other industrial practices of the processing of wheat, turning it into an infinite number of snack foods with all kinds of other nasty chemicals, sugar, dyes, to be sold to industrialized and developing countries alike because it's cheap, 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 but makes manufacturers fortunes. All these facts should make us want to discover what so many have described as their best life ever when they stop eating gluten. These types of heavily processed foods, with all the added chemicals and procedures they undergo from the ground or the lab to your plate, are not to be considered food fit for human consumption. One more nugget about glyphosate. It has been shown that the way insects are actually exterminated with this stuff is that their stomachs explode. Now, I know the human body can't be compared with an insect, or can it? Maybe if the chemical makes insect stomachs explode, it is doing some type of damage to your digestive tract. Something to consider. You can begin now to come to terms, acknowledge and accept that you must stop eating gluten if you suspect or know you are intolerant. It's really that simple, but it's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight. You will need to give your body 1 month to heal for every year you ate the offending gluten. Step 3, action. Truth number 5. I know we've heard it all before, but it's absolutely true. You most certainly are what you eat. Actually, we can bring this concept even closer to the absolute truth by saying you are what you absorb. As you can see in the new diagram, the parts of the intestines through which micronutrients pass to get to the bloodstream, the very same villi that break down food, when these are compromised, you will have trouble. If there are no villi left standing in particular areas of your intestine where you would normally digest food and absorb specific vitamins, if your intestinal villi are wearing down due to the continued bombardment of toxins in the diet, mainly gluten for some of us, depending how far the damage has been allowed to continue, will be the degree you need to heal. But before we get into lifestyle changes and benefits, there's one thing I should tell you if you don't already know. Some people with definite gluten sensitivities can eat wheat in countries other than their own. And this is particularly true for Americans. I wonder what that means, but I'll have to leave that research up to you. Okay, diet. A true gluten-free diet requires you to avoid the grains that are up on the slide. You can also just cut out wheat, barley, and rye, the top 3 offenders, or do a rotation diet to determine your sensitivity. So let's recap. In step 1, I gave you information about the whirlwind of destruction caused by gluten in the body, hoping to enhance your awareness that wheat and other grains are wreaking havoc if you are gluten sensitive. The second step is acceptance. If you are gluten sensitive, you must stop eating it. The third step is action. This is where you get to reign in your health and your life by making decisions that will bring you to the point where you can say you're living your best life ever.
But there are some other things you can do to support a body that needs to heal from any damage gluten may have caused. This is where stress and the adrenal response come in. When life's stress is managed effectively, cortisol levels remain normal and inflammation starts to die down. In my next video, I show the relationship between stress, cortisol, and gut health. Thanks for joining me. Catch you later.